This recording will be removed on Monday, April 20th, I believe. This is not All Bones Considered, nor is it Biographical Bytes from Bala, the Billionaire's episode, like I promised. I just flat out overcommitted. I committed to giving a talk at Fort Mifflin at the end of last week, and then I've got a separate talk to give at the Union League in the second week of May. And I spent last week preparing a new tour at Laurel Hill West that I'm going to give this coming Sunday. It's at the columbarium at the top of the hill. Now, I had written what I thought was going to be about 3/4 of what I was going to say about Ralph and Suzanne Roberts, that script. And then I just stopped, and I didn't get back to them for more than a week. And I got back to it yesterday. I said, I've really got to get this thing finished. And I just ran out of inspiration. I tacked on a cursory ending. I will release that sometime soon with a caveat. I intended to talk about other billionaires, Ed Snyder and the Flyers, as well as the Dorances and Campbell's Soup. The muse just wasn't there for the podcast this month. I apologize. So Ed Snyder and the Dorances go back into the potential podcast book that I live from, a little notebook that lives in front of me. Lime green, it says potential podcasts, and it is chock full of information. So how have I spent my last 7 to 10 days? Preparing a new tour, which is always an adventure, and it's always exciting. And so far, I have about 2/3 of it completed. It's up on the hill, the columbarium, and I finished the inside part. I've not finished the outside part yet, so I'm going to share with you what I've found so far to try to entice you to come out on Sunday morning, not Sunday morning, I apologize, Sunday afternoon at 1 o'clock at Laurel Hill West. We'll meet at the funeral home, then we'll walk up the hill to the crematorium and the columbarium, and I will tell you all about some of the people who are buried there. I will explain that the original building was 1938. It contained the chapel, the crematory that had 4 chambers. Chambers were also known as retorts, plus the chapel niche room and columbarium rooms. It's made out of local stone. If the sun is shining on Sunday, you can see it glisten. You'll know immediately it's Wissahickon schist stone. It's unmistakable. It has a slate gable roof. It's Gothic Revival. There's a 3-story tower with tracery windows and an enlarged stone cross. I do not know if there's ever been a bell in the tower. The outer doors are teak, the trim is limestone, and the designer was Frank Watson, 1859 to 1940. So this is late in his career. This is 1938. Frank Watson has 77 projects at Philadelphia Buildings website. He did mostly churches. The next big expansion on top of the hill was the Mausoleum of Peace. That's the outdoor section, which was built in the 80s and then expanded and is expanding again. And there is now room for a couple of hundred more people. 2005, the Reflection Garden was added for scattering of ashes. In 2010, the original retorts, the original crematoria were removed. A new crematory was installed, and the Tranquility Room was added. So when we go in, we're going to go first through what's called the Chapel Room, and then we go through the Tranquility Room. They are new. That's why so many people in there were buried or were inurned in the 21st century. Then we will go to the tower room, we'll go to the sanctuaries, we'll go downstairs, and we'll hit some of the people from many years earlier. But we're still never going to go back more than a century for any of these stories. So let's step in to the chapel room. As you're facing the building from the parking lot, that's the door on the right. If it's locked, the combination is the year that Laurel Hill West was founded, 1869. Once you're inside, look to your right. Well, first of all, when you walk in, just take it all in. It's almost like, I really hate to compare death with amusement, but it feels almost like an amusement park or a game center when you walk into the columbarium, because so many people in the 21st century have bright displays and the lights are shining, and it's just a glorious place to be. And right over your right shoulder, as soon as you walk in the door, you're going to turn around, and that is niche Chapel 89. There is a picture of a young man, a young blonde male. His name is Ilya Zhitomitsky. He was born in 1989 in Moscow. Graduated from Lower Merion High School in 2007. He rode a unicycle. He was a competitive ballroom dancer. And in 2020, he dropped out of college with 1 semester left to help form Diaspora with an asterisk with 3 friends. The asterisk represents a dandelion that's about to disperse its seeds. What Diaspora represented was what they called the anti-Facebook or even defacebook, part of the liberation technology movement. Private, decentralized, each member of the network controls their own data. He was an immensely talented computer programmer with a brilliant future ahead of him, and at age 21, he took his own life by inhaling inert gas, helium. I have a podcast scheduled about him for November. Now, to your left, about halfway down, and I guess about shoulder level, Chapel 51, you'll see the final resting place of John J. O'Connor, 1914 to 2012. He lived to be 98. He was from D.C. He went to Gonzaga High School and then Georgetown, but he came to Philly, got his master's from Wharton in 1938. And in 1942, he fought in World War II in the China-Burma-India Theater. He was a member of Merrill's Rodders. These were long-range penetration teams. Later, this sort of team became LRPs in Vietnam, the long-range recon patrols. O'Connor earned a Bronze Star. He was discharged as a lieutenant colonel. And while he was in the Far East, he learned Mandarin. He brought home as souvenirs 2 ceremonial swords, 2 Japanese ceremonial swords that were captured from prisoners. And a couple of decades later, he had second thoughts, and he returned those swords to Japan through the embassy so that an attempt could be made to find the rightful owners or the family of the people that those swords had been taken from. He taught evening investment classes at Temple for 25 years. 1995, he retired as VP of Morgan Stanley Dean Witter. I did talk about the China-Burma-India campaign somewhat in a podcast I did about Isidore Rovden a few years ago, Biographical Bytes from Bala, number 26. Now, further down that left-hand wall, about the same level, you'll come to Chapel 10. There are 3 containers. 2 of them belong to Joseph Fairchild Beam, 1954, 1988, and Dorothy Beam, 1924, 2018. The third one belongs to his father, who was a bank guard. His name was Sunbeam. He was the only child. Joseph was a quiet, serious student. He went to Malvern Prep and St. Tommy Moore. He got a scholarship for college in Iowa, then stayed for grad school in 1979. But he was not happy. He said, "I felt like I was the first black gay man ever." His mother and father accepted when he came out. His mother even tried to find some dates for him. She tried to play matchmaker for him. In the 1980s, he got a job at Giovanni's Room, the gay bookstore. Back then it was on South Street. He couldn't find any literature by or about gay black men, so he decided to publish an anthology himself. He put ads in the Philadelphia Gay News and elsewhere. His slogan became "Visibility is Survival." Remember, this is the 80s. Submissions started to flow in. He did interviews with recently out gay black icons like Bayard Rustin, Audre Lorde, Chip Delaney. And in 1986, he published In the Life, the first book by and about black gay men. He went on to found Black Out magazine. That's Black/Out magazine, which is a clever name. He actually became the beacon for young black gay writers. He started on a second collection. He was working this time with poet Essex Hemphill. But his friends noticed that he was losing weight. He started to avoid his family. He had caught AIDS, and he died Christmas Eve, 1988. He was cremated. His ashes were placed here in the urn. Essex Hemphill moved in with his family and finished the book. And in 1999, Brother to Brother was released, co-edited by Joseph Beam. Dorothy became an LGBTQ activist, and she created a writing scholarship at Temple under his name, the Joseph Beam Writing Scholarship. I did a podcast about Joe, All Bones Considered, number 35, part 4, a few years ago. Now, don't go into the next room yet, but stop at that wall and look for a gold medal. It's in an upper niche. If you're not tall, you may not be able to see it. But there are 2 pictures, and there are 2 people in Chapel 70 that I want to talk about. The man is Augustin A.J. Pocock, 1922 to 2012. He was born in Shanghai. During World War II, he became a corporal in special services, and he got involved in putting shows together. When he was discharged from the Army, he produced industrial musicals for companies like Westinghouse and Honda. Every year, they would literally put on a musical comedy about their products at their annual convention. It became a huge deal. They had musicals like The Bathtubs Are Coming and Diesel Dazzle. There was an award-winning documentary called Bathtubs Over Broadway in 2018 that featured some of these shows that Pocock was producing. In 1956, he married Margaret T. Cobbin on stage during the play Lunatics and Lovers. They divorced in 1969, and in 1983, he married another actress, Charlotte Fairchild. I'll talk about her in a few seconds. A.J. was a life member of Players Club and the Episcopal Actors Club. In 1975, he created the Honda Golf Classic, but it only lasted for 4 years. He was an honorary trustee of the Actors Fund, and he was the shepherd of the Lambs Club in New York City from 1998 to 2001. All told, he spent 70 of his 90 years in the entertainment business. His second wife was Charlotte Fairchild, 1913 to 2013. She was born in Ohio, and she spent a relatively modest 50 years on the stage and screen, both on and off Broadway. She had several listings in the Internet Broadway database: Mame, Fiorello, Mr. President, Damn Yankees, 42nd Street. In 66 through 68, she was a standby for Angela Lansbury during Mame. And in 1967, she starred in an Experiment in Television episode called We Interrupt This Season. Experiment in Television was just what it sounds like. It was an experimental TV show in the late 60s. The week before, they'd featured an interview with Marshall McLuhan, and the week after, there was a presentation from the Theater of the Deaf to show you the variety that was on this show that Charlotte was on. She appeared in small roles in One Life to Live, The Nurses, and she spent her last years in the Actors Home in Englewood, New Jersey. The Actors Home had picked up the remnants of the old Edwin Forrest home. And if she had not had enough money for this niche, there is another place in the cemetery where she could have been buried for free, since she was living at the Actors Home. Edwin Forrest set that up. Now we can go into the other room and go straight ahead to that arch. The top one, Tranquility A. That's Ying-Kao Lee, Y.K. Lee, Ph.D., 1932 to 2020. He was born in Shanghai. His father was a textile magnate. He studied English in Hong Kong. And in 1957, he got his bachelor's degree from the University of Leeds and decided it would not be a good idea to return to communist China. So he came to the United States, got his master's and Ph.D. in physical organic chemistry from the University of Cincinnati, and starting with DuPont in 1965. For DuPont, are you ready for this? He invented the lucite polymethyl methacrylate dispersion lacquer, which helps keep automobiles shiny for up to 20 years. If you are my age, you remember that cars looked new for about a year, and then they started to fade. It's only been within the last 30 or 40 years that all of these cars that stay shiny and polished for 20 years, and it's because of the work that Y.K. Lee did at DuPont. He had many achievement awards in China. He did retire from DuPont after 35 years. You may have heard his daughter. His daughter is pop science psychologist, podcaster, author, Professor Angela Duckworth from the University of Pennsylvania. Her podcast, No Stupid Questions. Her specialty is grit, perseverance. Now, to the right of YK, Dr. Lee, is another doctor, but this is an MD. This is Tranquility 22, Andrew Norton, except he said, call me Andy. He got his bachelor's from St. Louis U, went to med school in University of Wisconsin, and went into internal medicine. Wisconsin, Madison. That's why I did that. He loved teaching. He told everybody, call me Andy. But he got involved in the business of medicine. And in 2012, he was hired as Senior Vice President of Mainline Health. In other words, he was the top doc. He was the leading physician for the entire Mainline Health system, and it's multiple hospitals and clinics. Unfortunately, he himself was suffering from a long-term autoimmune disease, and it caused his gradual deterioration, and he died at 64. He did receive a posthumous medical degree from Jefferson. Now, just underneath Dr. Andy is a red box with an FBI shield on it. This is Tranquility 28, Wayne Gilbert Davis, 1938-2020. Wayne grew up in New York City. He went to UConn. He was on their 1960 basketball team. But in 1962, Wayne Davis was one of the first 4 black agents to graduate from the FBI Academy. And he worked his way up the ladder. 1980, he oversaw the investigation in the shooting of civil rights activist Vernon Jordan. 1981, he was the first black special agent in charge. That was in Detroit. And then in 85, he came to Philadelphia. He was in charge of the FBI in Philadelphia and South Jersey. And he was a leader in efforts not only to hire minorities, but to hire women into the FBI. He retired from the FBI at 50. He spent 10 years in corporate security with Roman Haas and had a very enjoyable retirement. Now, before we leave Tranquility, there's a police badge and a photo in Tranquility 33, the same wall as Davis and Dr. Norton. But I couldn't find much about her. This is Gloria Richardson. She worked for the Philadelphia Police for 21 years, mostly in the youth division. She was promoted to sergeant in 1971. I have a feeling she stayed on for 20 years and took her pension and got out and lived a happy life. I could find nothing about her in the newspaper. I found one picture, which I'm sharing. But other than that, she's kind of lost. And yet she was one of the first black women police officers in Philadelphia. Okay, we're leaving Tranquility. We are walking past the restroom on the right and a storage room on the left into the chapel. It's a nice little chapel. It's showing its age. It's about 90 years old now. We're not passing through the chapel. I have a surprise for you. Make a left turn at the aisle. Go down a few rows, make a left turn, and you're facing 2 wooden doors. Go open the doors. This is Tower. The Tower is my favorite niche in the columbarium. All it lacks is a bookshelf and a fireplace. On the left in Tower 74, is Edwin McCoach, 1894 to 1951. 1915, he went to the U.S. Naval Academy, and by 1918, he was active duty Navy. He was executive officer of the Tallahassee, and he got engaged at the same time. He did not make a career out of the Navy, however. He was involved in a live fire exercise, and he retired as a lieutenant commander. 1926, he was a golfer. He shot at Pine Valley, mind you, the toughest course, what's considered the toughest course in the United States. He shot 106 with a 26 handicap for 80. That's insane. In 1951, he and his wife drove to Rosemont, train station, what's now the SEPTA R5 line. He got out, and this is the days before automatic transmission, so you had to put the car, pull the emergency brake. He got out and the car started to roll. His wife managed to get out, and she was fine, but he tried to get back in and control the car, lost his balance, he got dragged into a ditch with the car, and he was killed at age 57. Totally out of nowhere, an accidental death. Now in Tower 51, a husband and wife team I just found out about, and now I have to find out so much more about them. It's Logan Blair Gill, 1894 to 1982. He was a 1916 Princeton graduate and went straight into the 315th Division, where he was a first lieutenant. After the war, he attended PAFA. He's a cousin of the artist Maxfield Parrish. He became a stockbroker. He started his own agency. He even did some work for Pennsylvania Railroad. But as a side project, he did artwork, and he did a few dozen magazine covers. He and his wife purchased a converted stable in Chestnut Hill and made it into a 6-level terraced garden with a pool. Logan and his wife were heavily involved in the Society for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. He was in charge of his regiment's dog, Philly, who'd been gassed in France, along with a lot of his mates. And when Philly died in 1932, Logan had him stuffed and sent him to the regiment headquarters, where Philly is today, at the 315th Division Regiment headquarters. He was also a lifelong member of the Horticultural and Zoological Societies. Now, I barely skipped the surface on Margaret Webster Mello Gill, his wife, 1901 to 1986. She went to Women's School of Design in PAFA. She specialized in watercolors, many local and regional exhibits. But then I hit this during World War II. She served as Coast Guard petty officer. In 1946, she won an international pistol shooting competition. And I know I've got more research to do. Sorry, I'll probably have more by the time of the tour. At least I hope to. And also in Tower 67, hidden way down in the corner by the floor, is Joseph Barry Jr., 1894-1976. His father, Joseph Sr., was one of 1,200 men who suffers from Moonlight Graham syndrome. His father played one game in the majors with the Phillies in 1902. Joe Jr. graduated from Northeast Manual and went to UPenn. From 1915 to 1918, he was an intercollegiate pentathlete. 1916-17, varsity baseball, captain of the baseball team. 1916-17, All-American fullback. And he was on the only Penn team that played in the Rose Bowl. They played the Oregon Webfoots. He served briefly in the war, then went to Horton U. In 1921, he played 7 games at second base for the New York Giants. In 1922, if you've seen the movie Field of Dreams, and when Ray is talking to Moonlight Graham, he says, "What did it feel like?" He said, "John McGraw pointed his bony finger at me and said, 'Right field.'" Or was it left field? I forget which. Anyway, that must be what Joe Barry Jr. went through. John McGraw pointed his bony finger at me and said, "Run for Mathewson on second base." He played 7 games in 1922, all of them as a pinch runner. Got back into the military, World War II, the Marines this time. He saw combat. He actually was discharged as a colonel. He spent his career as personal property and real estate assessor. And in 1964, he was elected to a Hall of Fame I did not know existed, the National Football Foundation Hall of Fame at Rutgers University. So we're leaving Tower, and we're going back through the chapel. Now head to the hallway on the left, and make a right. There's a giant break front there. It looks German to me. It looks hand-carved. Nobody can tell me anything about it. Nobody can tell me how long it's been there. It needs a massive restoration. There are a couple of hand-carved chairs that match with it also. But there it is. We're going to pass that If you need to go to the restroom, now's your chance. Peel off, go to the restroom, and meet us in Peace. Peace is the very appropriate name for this next room, the Mausoleum of Peace. Briefly, we will stop at piece 252. It's about knee-high, a third of the way down the right-hand wall. This is a cenotaph. That means it is an empty tomb. But for more than 20 years, this niche held the remains of Philip Jason. Born and raised in Korea, he was part of an 1884 failed coup and convicted of treason. So he escaped to the United States. He became a translator. He went to medical school at George Washington University. And in 1890, when he was 26 years old, he was the first Korean to be made a U.S. citizen. In 1892, he married Muriel Armstrong, niece of James Buchanan. Now, if you're thinking, gee, a niece of James Buchanan, wasn't that Harriet Lane? Yes, Harriet Lane was another niece. She served as James Buchanan's first lady during his term. She's the one who donated the money to Johns Hopkins so that the pediatric manual they put out all the time is the Harriet Lane Manual. The Harriet Lane Clinic for Pediatrics is there. Anyway, that was who he married. He married another one of James Buchanan's nieces. Now, Philip was pardoned in 1895, so he returned to Korea, and he continued his efforts to end the monarchy. But this led to a rebanishment to the U.S. in 1898. So he came back, and he worked at the Wistar Institute for the next few years. In 1904, he started a publishing company and started publishing information about the necessity for Koreans' independence. And he and Syngman Rhee and many other Koreans who had moved to America formed the first Korean conference in Philadelphia in 1919 at what is now the Plays and Players Theater on Delancey Street. If you go there today, there is a plaque. I missed it the first, 70 times I went to Plays and Players, but one time I actually saw it, and now I look for it every time I go. It tells this historical event when all of these Koreans gathered together for their freedom at Plays and Players, and then they marched to Independence Hall, and they took turns sitting in the chairs that the various delegates used when they were signing the Declaration of Independence. And it didn't work, of course. Korea did not gain its freedom until after the Second World War. Well, Philip went bankrupt in 1924. He wanted to go back to medicine, but the medicine had changed so much, he literally went back to medical school. And then he came out and started teaching microbiology and also teaching medicine. World War II, he was a voluntary physical exam officer for the Army. And after the war, Koreans gained their independence. Philip was encouraged to run as the first president of Korea. He was petitioned by more than 3,000 people, and he declined. His friend Syngman Rhee was elected as first president. He served from 1948 to 1960. When the Korean War started, Philip came back to the United States, and he died here in 1948. He was cremated, and his remains stayed here until 1994, when at the request of the government of Korea, they were repatriated to the National Cemetery in Seoul. There is a Philip Jason house in Media that's an historic site, and I have a podcast scheduled about him for July of 2026. Also appropriately in this room of peace are two women, Mary Yagura, 1911 to 2005, and in Piece 257, Mary Kawata, 1892-1980. They are two of our 4 American citizens of Japanese ancestry at Laurel Hill West who were swept up in the shameful imprisonment brought by Executive Order 9066. And I'm going to do a full podcast about that in December of this year. It's scheduled for December, Biographical Bytes from Bala number 63. One other person in the Mausoleum of Peace to mention, and unfortunately he's way down low on the right-hand wall, the last row down. His name is J. Earl Ness, 1930 to 1987. He started playing keyboards when he was 5, and by the time he was 8, he was playing in recitals. At 17, he was the youngest person ever to receive an associate degree from the American Guild of Organists. He won a full scholarship to Penn, and as a freshman, he became the campus-wide organist. Now, I did a podcast about the organs in Philadelphia, Biographical Bytes from Bala, number 15, but I didn't know about Mr. Ness when I did the podcast, or I would have included him, because I did talk about the Irvine Auditorium organ, which is where he played, of course. He did get into Curtis, finally. He got his B.A. from Curtis, while at the same time he was taking night classes at Temple in psychology. So he's studying organ and composition during the day and psychology at night. 1951, he started his 36-year tenure at First Baptist Church. That was until his death. He founded the Philadelphia Oratorio Society. Showing no preference for religions, he became the organist at Kenseth Israel in Elkins Park. He did have a recording, 1965. He recorded a 2-organ recital on YouTube. His life companion was George Walters, and there is an annual J. Earl Ness Memorial Concert. We leave peace, we go next door to hope. And there's a few people in hope I want to tell you about. The one we're going to start with is just inside the door. Stop just as soon as you're inside the door and look up at the ceiling on your left. And there's a stone up at the top that's got some faded carving on it that says Schellenberger, but the first name is not Elizabeth. That is Hope 4. That is the final resting place of Elizabeth Schellenberger, a.k.a. Betty, a.k.a. Shelley, 1921 to 2019. Shelley started to play field hockey at Agnes Irwin when she was 9 years old. She grew up and lived in the same house for 75 years. At 18, she was the youngest player ever named to the USA women's field hockey team, and she was a starter. 1939 to 41, then there was the war, 1946 to 55, and 1960. The longest membership in history. She played as a starter on the field hockey team more than any other player. During the war, she joined the Marine Reserves and she became an aviation mechanic. She was president and co-founder of the Colonial Dames of Germantown, and she was a docent at Cliveden. She was president of the National Lacrosse and the National Hockey Organizations. She gave field hockey tours in England, Scotland, Wales, South Africa, Australia, New Zealand, and when she was too old to play, she umpired on the national and international level. The Schellenberger Umpiring Award was actually created by the USA Field Hockey Association. She was a coach at Chestnut Hill College, field hockey from 64 to 77, lacrosse from 65 to 77, and badminton from 50 to 56 and 64 to 77. 1986, Pennsylvania Sports Hall of Fame. 1988, first inductee, one of the first inductees into the Field Hockey Hall of Fame, and she is called the matriarch of field hockey. 1994, the National Lacrosse Hall of Fame. And on the side, she did house restorations, and she took up bowling, tennis, and golf, all of which she played quite well. Never married, never had a partner. Now, on the other side of the room, and buried in separate sections in Hope 517, is the name Rush Touton, 1900-1979. And then Hope 129 is Rush Touton Jr., 1931. 2001. Touton is a fried bread dough treat in Newfoundland. Now, Sr. was born in Wisconsin. He was a mechanic and an architect. He designed and patented machines for casing and curing tobacco and managed to cut the curing time of tobacco to 1/3 of what it had been with his machines. He worked for the Wharton Machine Company, and his machines are the ones that produce the Phillies, the Philly Blunts, the Phillies brands. He bought Wharton, and he changed its name to Soloranza. Rush Tuton Jr. studied architecture. He worked with Charles Clowder. We're going to talk about Charles Clowder in a couple of minutes. During World War II, he did sea patrol off the Pacific coast. He was an administrative engineer at General Electric, but he took an interest in trolley cars, and he started the Trolley Museum in Rock Hill, Pennsylvania. That's about an hour past Harrisburg. If it weren't so far away, it looks like a place I would want to visit. They have a collection of trolley cars from all around the world, and a lot of the photos on their website, it looks like were taken by Rush Tuton Jr. He died again in 2001. Now, I'll mention another doctor since we're in Hope. That's Walter Levinsky, 1920 to 98. He went to Allegheny College in Meadville and then Temple Med on a scholarship and 4 years in the U.S. Army from 56 to 60. He was an internist. He was chief of medicine at Northeastern for a while, and he had numerous teaching awards, the Lindbach Award, the Chapel of the Four Chaplains Legion of Honor Award. He served as president of Temple University Medical Society for a few years, and his portrait is on first floor Parkinson Pavilion. He was married to Cleo for 49 years, has 4 kids, and numerous grandkids. Now, as you're about to leave the Sanctuary of Hope, look for Yanni Santo. It's Hope 331. Yanni Santo, 1887-1977. He studied at the Royal Hungarian National Academy of Music in Budapest, Vienna, and Leipzig. In 1912, he was concertmaster under Wilhelm Furtwängler in the Lübeck Orchestra and the Chamber Music Association. 1920, professor of violin at the Academy of Music in Munich, which is today's University of Music and Performing Arts in Munich. From 1920 to 1938, he was the leader of the Munich String Quartet. He played a Guadagnini violin that was made in 1743, one of the earliest. It is now named for him. It is called the Santo Guadagnini. For a time, he also owned Stradivarius Lord Borwick, which was from 1702. He befriended the Italian Cardinal Eugenio Pacelli, who helped him get out of Europe. Of course, Eugenio Pacelli soon became Pope Pius XII. Santo was exposed to increasing persecution under National Socialism. He was not a Jew, but he supported the Jews, and he was not a Nazi. He was very anti-Nazi. So he was retired on October 1st, 1933, based on the law of restoration of the professional civil services. Despite pleas from Furtwängler and Richard Strauss, Santo was fired. So in 1939, he emigrated to the United States through Great Britain. And in 1942, he directed the Philadelphia Musical Academy. He stayed in that position for the next 20 years. He died in 1977, and afterwards there was a memorial concert for him at the Schubert Theater, as it was called then. Then it became the Merriam Theater. Now it's the Miller Theater. There is a massive mural of him in Munich. The people at Laurel Hill West who have murals don't have the murals in Philadelphia, except for Grover Washington Jr. But Posey Talbert's mural is in Indianapolis. I'm going to talk about him, but not on this, since he's buried outside. I'm only covering the people inside. Hope also has, way down at the bottom, it's blink and you'll miss it. Seriously, it's about a 4x4 brass plaque for Stella Yates Botello, M.D., 1919-2015. She was born in Tokyo, grew up in Wayne, went to Radnor High School, Glee Club, National Honor Society, lettered in swimming, basketball, and field hockey, went to UPenn, got a degree in chemistry, and went to women's medical, but she contracted TB from a patient and ended up spending a year in a sanatorium, which changed her orientation. She worked her way up. She became a physiology instructor, and she worked her way up from instructor to professor of physiology at the University of Pennsylvania Medical School. Also in 1981, she became a volunteer docent at the zoo, and she stayed there until she died in 2015. She stayed there until she was in her 90s as a volunteer at the zoo. She was the author or co-author of 80 papers, roughly, mostly on muscle physiology. She was a welcomed visiting professor from around the world, 2 medical honor societies, never married, no survivors. She has a portrait in the medical school. And the spot that she chose, I confirm that she chose this. This was not a charity case. She paid $160 to have her ashes placed in this little tiny hole down by the floor in the Hope Room. Moving on to meditation. Meditation is probably the dullest of the niches. It's my least favorite of the niche rooms, I have to admit. So far, it's kept me from investigating more than a few people. The 2 that I have to talk about, though, one of them is on the right-hand wall as you walk in. You look up, it's about eye high, it's just one word. It says Clowder. That's it. This is Meditation D, Charles Clowder, 1872-1938, son of German immigrants. At 15, he joined architect Theophilus Chandler Jr., the founder of the University of Pennsylvania Department of Architecture. And by 18, he was the chief draftsman for Frank Miles Day. Along with Cope and Stewardson, it was Day and Clowder that were originators of collegiate Gothic, that totally expected style you see at most Ivy League universities. His best-known buildings, definitely the Pitt Cathedral of Learning. That is staggering. That matches Julian Abel's Cathedral at Duke, the Pitt Cathedral of Learning. Go find that online. He also did the Stephen Foster Memorial. Princeton, he did 15 buildings. Penn State, he did 20 of their buildings. He did the Peabody Museum at Yale. He did big things. From 1922 to 25, he built Franklin Field. And then in 1927, he built the Palestra, what has been called the most important building in the history of college basketball. My favorite is under threat right now. 1938 to 1940, Clowder designed the Wilbur J. Cohen Federal Building in Washington, D.C. It's a mixed bag. It's an Egyptian Revival Art Deco building, but it's like carbon dating for Art Deco. And it is home to one of the most celebrated collections of New Deal artwork, massive Ben Shahn murals, and the building has been condemned by the Trump administration to be torn down. There's going to be no effort. I mean, people are frantically trying to preserve these murals right now because they're irreplaceable. And as is typical for the architects we have at Laurel Hill, with 1 or 2 exceptions, they build these magnificent buildings, and then they have these nothing markers. Frank Furness with his military marker, Napoleon Lebrun with his slab, John MacArthur with his small marker that's being eaten by the root of a tree. It's crazy that all these people build these incredible buildings, and then when they're buried, you have to squint to see where they're actually buried. The other one I'll mention in the meditation room is above the door. Just before you leave, look up and there's the name Roy Spretter, S-P-R-E-T-E-R, 1899-1967. He was born in Chicago. He moved to Gladwin in 1926. He did keep a studio in New York City. He did mostly advertising art, Camé, Bon Ami, Campbell's Soup, but he did not do the Campbell's Kids. He did magazine covers for Ladies' Home Journal, Women's Home Companion, and others. He was a member of the Palette and Chisel Club, Society of Illustrators, the Art Directors Club, and he took up oils and portraits late in life. I have not studied him as much as I want to. Eventually, he'll probably go into a virtual podcast about artists who are scattered around the cemetery, so we can look at a lot of the pictures. In the meantime, if you're curious, there's a page on Pinterest called Roy Spretter, S-P-R-E-T-E-R. It has several dozen of his illustrations. I mean, he's no Elizabeth Shippen Green, that's for sure, but he's still a decent child illustrator. Okay, we're leaving the mausoleum of meditation, the sanctuary of meditation, and carefully we're going to go down the stairs. Now, before you go down the stairs, 2 things. If the lights are not on, they will not go on when you go down the stairs. Flip the switch at the top. Second thing, see straight ahead? That's available. If you want the premier spot in the columbarium, you can purchase that. It's $11,000. All right, lights are on. Let's go down the switch. Let's go down the stairs and hold on to the banister. At my age, I always hold on to banisters. It's a whole different world down here, isn't it? Look at this place. Go into the first room and prepare to be shocked. You're going through one door and it opens up a whole world, and there's sunlight in the basement. All right, you have to see it to believe it. Some of my favorite people are here. The first niche, we've got Oscar Schwar. Everybody called him Papa, 1875 to 1946. Papa Schwar, S-C-H-W-A-R, was born in Germany, and he studied timpani. He came to the United States in 1903, and he spent 4 decades with the Philadelphia Orchestra. He worked with Stokowski and Ormandy, and he came up with tonal colors on the kettle drums that people had never heard before. Timpanists came from around the world to study with him. When the Curtis Institute opened, he was standing right there. He was the first chair of timpani for the Curtis Institute. He was known as the Grand Master of the kettle drum, the Grand Master of timpani. And when he died in 1946, Eugene Ormandy said he can never be replaced. So the next time you go to an orchestra presentation, think about the kettle drum. Next niche down, you look up towards the top. There's no glass in front of it. It's a stone for George Polgar, M.D., 1919 to 2015. He was born in Budapest. He decided, you notice there's a lot of Hungarians. I got 3 Hungarians on this tour, believe it or not, and Viennese and Germans, and the Koreans and the Japanese. This is America. This is America, yes. Anyway, George Polgar was born in Budapest, and he decided when he was 5 years old he was going to be a doctor when he grew up. So he graduated from med school in 1938, and he literally pulled his parents off a train that was bound for Auschwitz. But they still later became victims of the Holocaust, as did many of his family members. Nonetheless, in 1944, he started, this is during the war, he started a children's hospital in the Budapest Jewish ghetto. Under the Soviets, he was briefly imprisoned. He rose to be senior pediatrician at Budapest Children's Hospital, and during the uprising, 1956, we got a lot of Hungarians in Philadelphia. We got several tens of thousands Hungarian refugees back in 1956. Anyway, with his wife and 3 children, Dr. Polgar made a nighttime trek into Austria. They were led there by some freedom fighters. The freedom fighters guided them to the border and sent them over the border, and then turned around to go back. And a couple of minutes later, the Polgars heard gunshots, and the 2 freedom fighters who had led them to freedom had been shot and killed by Soviet troops. He became a private pediatrician for several Saudi royal families. He was Sophia Loren's children's private pediatrician. He took up other celebrity children also. His specialty was pediatric pulmonology. He was the founding editor of Pediatric Pulmonology. He was an avid photographer. He was an accomplished pianist. He was the first major figure in pediatric pulmonology. The annual lecture at CHOP is given in his name on kids' lung diseases. Now, in the niche across, straight back, about eye high, maybe chin high. Remember, it's DJ, but none of these are labeled. You have to look inside. There is a very impressive looking name. It looks like Wilhelm von Weimettel in 1890 to 1970. Actually, he pronounced his last name Weimettal, and everybody called him Willie. So he was Wilhelm von Weimettel sounds very impressive. Willie Weimettal doesn't sound as impressive. His father was stage director at the Vienna Opera House, and he was born in Vienna. He went to military school in Austria. In 1914, he joined the Hungarian army. I mistakenly thought he joined the Hungarian cavalry. I looked at one snippet and I thought it said cavalry, and that's the way I advertised it. False advertisement. He was not in the cavalry. He was in the Hungarian army. However, while he was there, he was challenged to a duel, and that's why he carried a large scar on his forehead for the rest of his life. He trained at the Hungarian Conservatory as a conductor. Because he was conducting opera, he spoke 7 languages. If you remember, Raymond Pace Alexander spoke several languages because he was working at the Metropolitan Opera House as a young man. He had to be able to communicate with the singers, so he learned Italian and French and German and all the other languages that operas are sung in. Willie came to the United States in 1927, and 1929 he was on staff at Curtis. He was confronted by a Russian singer who insisted on singing a role from a horse. Willie gave in and let him sing from the horse, but the singer tended to keep time by swinging his foot, and his boots had spurs on it. So every time he swung his foot, it didn't make the horse very happy, and it sort of destroyed the singing performance. Here's my favorite thing about Willie. 1935, he went to Hollywood. He spent 14 years at MGM as the personal director of all the musical scenes for Nelson Eddy and Jeanette MacDonald for 11 movies. 1938, he was founding member and treasurer of the Metropolitan Opera Artists of California. All the people who had performed at the Met, who now lived in California, now had a social club together. From 46 to 54, stage director for the New Orleans Opera. 1947, stage director for the Light Opera of Pittsburgh. And in 1954, he directed Maria Callas in her U.S. premiere. He said she was charming, a delight to work with. Late in life, he was awarded the Grand Cross of Austria, this country's highest civilian award. That's equivalent to the Presidential Medal of Freedom in the United States. I have a podcast scheduled for Wilhelm in mid-August because I want to tell you more about him and the military school in Austria and the Hungarian army and all sorts of things to talk about with him. Now, in that same niche, but on the right-hand wall, you will see Max Strassenberger, 1896 to 1963. Max was born in Bavaria, and he was raised in an orphanage. He was a super bassist. He played bass with the Philadelphia Orchestra for 35 years. He retired in 1961. He had received his 25-year gold watch from the orchestra founder, Francis Ann Worcester, in 1952, and he was elected to the Bass Player Hall of Fame. Did you even know such a thing existed? 1963, he was playing at a benefit at the Academy of Music, Madame Butterfly. Between the first and second act, he took a break. Coming back to the pit in the second act, he tripped on the steps, fell, and hit his head and died. He was 67 years old. Next niche, right about in the middle, is Judge Doris Harris, 1923 to 83. She went to Overbrook High, Howard U. In the yearbook of Howard says she was histrionic and fluent, goes for dramatics, wants to be a lawyer, preferably a congresswoman. She made it, 1949, UPenn Law. She then joined the black law firm which became Norris, Green, Harris, and Higginbotham, and spent 5 years in private practice, and then 3 years with small business administration. Remember Leon Higginbotham? Then she spent 5 years as counsel for school districts. She worked closely with Connie Clayton. 1971, she was appointed to the Court of Common Pleas by our first Governor Shapiro. That would be Milton Shapp. You might not have known that Milton Shapp's name was Shapiro before he changed it. 1973, Doris was the top vote getter in the Democratic primary, and she spent most of her time at juvenile court. She upset a lot of people with what they saw as lenient sentencing. She died at 61. There is a Doris May Harris Scholarship Fund at the University of Penn Law, and the Philadelphia Bar gives the DMH award to an outstanding female black Philadelphia attorney every year. I did a podcast about her, All Bones Considered, number 71, part 3. Also in remembrance, down by the floor, in that same niche as Doris, he's under Doris down by the floor, is Lon Jordet, 1888-1959. 1910, 12, and 13. UPenn, he lettered in football and basketball, and in 1912 he was a football All-American. He was UPenn basketball coach from 1914 to 1920. In the 1919-20 season, they went 21-1 and retroactively were named national champions. In 1920, he had to leave Philadelphia 10 years for business, but in 1927, or 26 actually, Clowder built the Palestra. I have a feeling it might have been in an attempt to tempt him back. The Palestra first game was January 1st, 1927. So I will talk about the Palestra in January, one of the episodes. I'm not sure if it's going to be All Bones Considered or Biographical Bytes, but I'll talk about Clowder and the Palestra in January podcast. Now, Clowder came back and coached from 1930 to 43. His final record was 226 and 143, the highest 20th century total. Fran Dunphy did top him, but it took him until 2001-2002 season to do it. Lon had 7 conference titles. He invented an early form of zone defense, but he felt forced out. He did not keep up with the game. The game passed him by, and he was not a happy man. When he was solicited for a donation of the Alumni Association after the war, he just spilled his bile onto that page when he wrote back and essentially told the university to go to hell and never to write him again. So this is probably why you've never heard of Lon Jourdette, this winningest basketball coach who invented the zone defense, and he just annoyed too many people. In 1959, he went to a TB hospital out in Lancaster. The head doc there, coincidentally, used to play basketball for him at Penn. But his condition was not getting better, and after a week or two in the hospital, he went head first out of a third-floor window and was killed on impact. And I did Biographical Bytes from Bala number 60 about early days of basketball. There's one more room to go, and that is the Sanctuary of Faith. On the left-hand wall, Faith 41 is the marvelous name Reuben Exsurgin, Ph.D., 1889-1961. Reuben, with his marvelous Armenian name, actually came from a Turkish family. He was born in Massachusetts, his bachelor's from MIT, his fellowship in physics, and during the Great War, he served with ordnance and achieved major. In 1920, he married the cellist Maydel Hagenbuch. In 1920-29, he was assistant to the vice president at Baldwin Locomotive. 1930-34, he was a construction engineer for E.I. DuPont. So he combined all of these together, and in 1934-47, he became construction engineer for Bud. And he was in charge of the first stainless steel locomotive, the Pioneer Zephyr. You know it better as the Silver Streak. So, yes, Reuben Exsurgin was the inventor of the Silver Streak. He organized the research laboratories at Franklin Institute, and he played a major role in developing something that really has my attention now, an atomic cannon. The United States military built 20 artillery pieces that would fire 240-millimeter nuclear artillery shells. Obviously, they never were live-fired with nuclear shells. They were live-fired with non-nuclear shells. 7 of these monsters still survive. There's one at the Aberdeen Proving Grounds. But, oh boy, do I want to do a podcast about atomic cannons. Wow. Reuben Exsurgin got many awards and citations from the War Department. December 1st, 1961, he spent the day in meetings in New York City. He took the train home, got into his car in the parking lot, and slumped over, and he died in the parking lot. His daughter became a dancer and a choreographer, but Reuben is buried here in the bowels of Laurel Hill West Columbarium, in the same room and across from Vladimir Yaroslav Fuchs, Ph.D., 1901-1941. He was born in Czech, and I don't know if that was Czechoslovakia or Czech Republic or what, in 1901. I guess I could look that up. But he came to Philadelphia in 1921, and he started out doing domestic work. He learned English with no accent. He could read scientific studies in 15 different languages, and he was conversational in 12 different languages. 1926, he got his B.S. from Wharton, then an M.A. and a Ph.D. in anthropology. And in 1927, he became a fellow of the American School of Prehistoric Research. 1929-30, he studied in the Danube Valley, and in 32, he headed the joint mission to Serbia for the Peabody and Fogg Museums. 1937-38, he worked with the WPA and supervised various Indian burial grounds, and he became best known for his work in Catawba ceramic pottery technology. He was actually better known in Central Europe than he was in the United States. He was a research associate at 10 different Czech museums and other museums in Central Europe at the same time. But unfortunately, he was addicted to alcohol. He drank himself to death at a very young age. So that is the people I have inside. And let me see how long that took. Okay, an hour and 1 minute. That is acceptable. Then we will go up the stairs, and depending on the weather, we will go outside, and I've got 14 more people that I still have to do the write-up on. But when we go outside, let me tell you who we're going to meet there. We're going to meet Sam Evans, who lived to be 106 years old, believe it or not. Sam Evans was the godfather of black Philadelphia politics. He pulled strings on everybody, and nobody knew where the power came from. He was just there. Edie Huggins, if you remember Huggins, Edie on the television. Jeff Johnson was a session guitarist and bass player who died young. Florence Johnson Reed was, she was Dean of Graduate Studies at Cheney University. Walter Livingston Jr. was a black architect who did the Freedom Mall and Zion Baptist Church on North Broad Street. Linwood Blount, the Judge Blount, everybody called him Count Blount because things were very proper in his courtroom. Harry Safarbi, another artist, and Posey Talbert, the 6'6" photojournalist from Indianapolis, who has a mural with angel wings. And Monette Sudler, believe it or not, one of the, in my opinion, the two great women jazz guitar players of the last 30 or 40 years. Monette Sudler is buried at Laurel Hill West outside. And then, if we have time, we'll move our way to the reflection pool. Not the reflection pool, the reflection garden, where there are 3 open books with names carved in them. Among the names carved there are Gerald Crone, 1933 to 2020, co-founder of the Negro Theater Company. Benjamin Rubin, 1917-2010, inventor of the bifurcated needle for smallpox vaccination. Jerome Kay, MD, 1921-2015, inventor of the Kay-Shiley disc valve, the first disc heart valve. Shiley went on to make a better one called the Bjork-Shiley, but Kay made the first one with him. And we will finish because there is a rule. We cannot tell the histories of people who died less than 5 years ago, but I will point out to you that his name is already in the book, and you can say goodbye to Pierre Robert, who died last year. So that's what I have planned for Sunday. If you want to join me, if you want to download this and try to do this on your own, you can do it. But this is only going to be up for a few days. This is a chance for me to do a quick dress rehearsal. And I will post this, and then I got to get back to research. Eventually, you will hear about Ralph Roberts and Ed Snyder and the Dorrance family. But it's not going to happen anytime soon. I got too many other things to do. And then by the 1st of May, I want to have a podcast done on the nativist riots. So I've still got to do the research on that. All right, I hope you enjoy this, and maybe I'll see you on Sunday. Stay safe, stay well, stay above ground.